What is going on, everybody? It is good to be back with the reveal of the 21st ranked Denver Broncos in my 2020 NFL Power Rankings inside this deep dive series. I do want to issue a quick reminder, guys. Please do hit that like button down below. It really helps this video get more views and support my channel, so that's the easiest way to do it right there. I appreciate you in advance. Also, expect a double header here, hoping to get the 20th ranked team out tomorrow, so you guys have lots of deep dive content to consume for the weekend. So this Broncos team is very unique, and we've used the word polarizing with a lot of teams in this series, but that takes on a new meaning with this Broncos team. And I'm going to say it out the gate here. I'm not going to spoil my win total expectations. There's good things and bad things to say about this team, but if you're looking for that Super Bowl flyer, last year I said this about the 49ers. They did rank a little bit higher. But if you're looking for that, $20 bet that can return $1,000 if they win the Super Bowl, to me, that is the Denver Broncos this year. And that is because they have a crazy high ceiling. I can't say enough about what John Elway has done here. He's had his ups and downs as a GM, but this offseason, this team's not getting enough respect for everything they did to put this team in a position to win a championship. But this is a unique situation with Drew Lock. Obviously, the quarterback position is pivotal for every team in the league. But the question marks at the quarterback position, the boom or bust upside here, they're all in on Drew Lock being the guy and reaching his potential with a lot of those physical tools he has. So it's a very unique team, extremely polarizing, very difficult to rank, but this is going to be a fun one. So if you're new to this series, what we do is we go through the roster. We're going to rank every position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. I realize it is a video game, but it's a really nice copyright-free graphic that I get to use to show you how I perceive each player. So just keep that in mind. And then after that, we're going to take a look at this team's schedule, talk about their Vegas over-under, and my ultimate sort of win total expectations for this team, or at least a ballpark of what we can look at for this Broncos team. So let's hop in to the roster review, and we alluded to it, but Drew Lock, this is the pivot point of this team season. There is no way around it. That is the resounding theme for this team, undisputedly. How good can Drew Lock be? So they're going to rank 28th, and it's a unique ranking because I hope he proves me wrong. The best version of Drew Lock could be a top 10 quarterback. We could be looking at almost, in a way, the sophomore years that we've seen from guys recently, like a Lamar Jackson, like Patrick Mahomes. Both those guys weren't the top quarterbacks in their classes, but they had these rare physical tools, and when their teams built around them in the way that this Broncos team has, everything clicked and they unlocked something in them that we hadn't necessarily seen on a consistent basis. I think that sort of upside is in there for Drew Lock. Now, he doesn't quite have the arm that Patrick Mahomes has, though I don't think he's that far off, and he's obviously not as good of an athlete as those guys, but he can do a lot of those things that these top quarterbacks do as far as extending plays, sensing pressure, manipulating the pocket to extend plays, utilizing the entire field in the passing game. When Drew Lock was coming out of college, I was a little bit higher on him because of those tools we just said. I did have a first-round grade on Drew Lock. I thought this was an exceptional pick. I think they handled it well, not forcing him into action too early. They did kind of let him get his feet wet at the end of last season, but we didn't get enough to make any sound statements on him. So I had Drew Lock as my third quarterback in that class behind Murray and Haskins. I did have a higher grade on Drew Lock than Justin Herbert, who went with the 6th overall pick this year. So whatever that's worth, that's just kind of where I stand on Drew Lock. I would love for him to just shatter this 28th quarterback ranking, but it's been a theme throughout this series that you can't just give everyone the benefit of the doubt, especially when you're making a 32-team series. You got to give everyone, more or less the same, I don't want to use the word bias, but just, you got to look at everyone on a level playing field. You can't pick favorites here. From what we've seen with Drew Lock, there's nothing to say that he's anything other than a project, but he is different than some of these other quarterbacks, I will say. that rank in this range. I do genuinely believe in Drew Lock, but I'm not going to put all of my eggs in the basket of saying he's going to emerge as even a franchise quarterback for this team, because there are aspects of his game as far as the pre-snap and post-snap process, the decision making. I do think the accuracy is there, but can he really click as the full-time starter, take on an offense and execute on a play-to-play, game-to-game basis? So that's really all there is to say about Drew Lock. I don't think there's anyone out there that can confidently take a hard stance on Drew Lock. But I am very excited to see what he is going to bring to the table. Now, here's the deal. If he flops, it's not like the Chargers where they at least have Tyrod Taylor as a backup, or the Bears where they have Nick Foles as a backup. They're all in on Drew Lock. It's Jeff Driscoll, who's almost a poor man's version of Drew Lock with those physical tools. Elway is kind of almost rightfully so gotten a lot of crap for just liking tall, athletic, strong-arm quarterbacks that don't necessarily have it between the ears. That's kind of another one here with Jeff Driscoll. And then you do have Brett Rypien around. He could maybe be Trevor Siemian or whatever if Drew Lock is a total flop. But that's worst-case scenario, I would say. So the quarterback room is going to rank 28th, and I think it's fair to say that that is the reason that they are going to rank in the 20s here and not in the teens. But like I said, this team, I've already made it. I've made a Super Bowl flyer bet on this team. I would love it now that I am financially invested if Drew Lock can figure this out, because the rest of this roster that we're going to go through here is I'm not going to say flawless, but it's impressive. So let's move on to the running back room. Not going to spend a whole lot of time here. We're very familiar with Melvin Gordon. He is a really good, sound, do-it-all back. Didn't get the top market contract he was looking for, and I don't think he necessarily deserved that. He is a B-grade running back. Like, he's really good. He's a top 15 starter. He's got power, speed. I like me some Melvin Gordon. I think he's maybe not quite as explosive as he was 2 seasons ago, where he maybe was closer to that top 5 back, but he is going to bring much more of a between the tackles, traditional running game presence to this offense that I warned Broncos fans last year that Phillip Lindsay is just not going to bring. I said that I like Phillip Lindsay, and in the year before his breakout, I even pointed him out as an undrafted pickup that could surprise some people, but that turned around last year after he had a 1,000-yard Pro Bowl season and saying, look, he had a lot of big runs, his speed is a threat, but he doesn't really translate that, as well as you would like to see as a receiver out of the backfield. And just as far as his vision and power between the tackles, Phillip Lindsay just doesn't bring that at a high level. So Melvin Gordon's going to be the perfect complement to be more of that physical presence. You have Phillip Lindsay. It's going to be, I think, about a 60-40 split here. I think both these guys will be pretty productive. I would love to see Phillip Lindsay take a step up in the receiving game. He just doesn't really feel natural catching the ball a lot of the times. Like, he takes a while to kind of get back to top speed after catching the ball, but also he just doesn't show the shiftiness that you see from some of these smaller guys like Austin Eckler, Dion Lewis over the days. Just doesn't necessarily have that natural feel as a pass catcher that you'd like to see from a guy that profiles more as a scat back. Maybe in year 3 he can take a step up in that department that I think over the course of his career, that's going to be how he can maximize his wallet. But I like the split there. They do rank, where do I have this put? 16th for the running back position. And then you do have some depth here as well. You got Royce Freeman still in the building. I've never been big on him, but he's shown some good flashes. There were times last year where he did impress me. I do think it was important to bring in Melvin Gordon, which, by the way, was a really good 2-year kind of market contract for a good quality starter. I think there's still room to pay running backs in the league, but to the extent that they paid Melvin Gordon, because it's not going to cripple their team a la Ezekiel Elliott or whatever. So that was a tangent. But yeah, you've got Royce Freeman here. He's a good backup. If Gordon can't stay healthy, he will bring some of that power element, just not at the high level. I think just from his vision and burst, it's just not all there as a true starter for Royce Freeman. But he has his moments. The last guy we'll mention here, keep an eye on Levante Bellamy. He is very fluid as a runner. He is explosive. This reminds me a lot of Philip Lindsay getting brought in as an undrafted free agent 2 years ago for this team. I don't know how much he'll see the ball this year. I don't foresee this team keeping Philip Lindsay around. He might have a restricted free agent year after this, but he might get paid from someone. So I do think Levante Bellamy could be a long-term scat back for this team, or a change of pace outside zone runner in the sort of Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert realm of explosive, not necessarily powerful running backs, but good speed threats with really fluid movement ability. So there's your running back room. Again, they are going to rank 16th. Then the receiver room. This is where you really get fired up. So Courtland Sutton, I think, really started to throw his name in the conversation for being a top 10 wide receiver last year. I loved Courtland Sutton coming out in 2018. I don't understand why he got sort of disrespected in the way that he did, falling into the second round. He reminded me so much of Allen Robinson when he was coming out of SMU, and he's kind of reached that level, right, of that true number one receiver with size, speed, good route running, exceptional ball skills. If Drew Lock gets unlocked here, Courtland Sutton is going to be a top 10 wide receiver this year. Now, that is an if. And in the games that we did see Drew Lock play, he did like throwing the ball to Courtland Sutton's way. So I have really high expectations for Courtland Sutton to, at worst, be sort of Allen Robinson for this team, which is a true number one. Maybe he's not a guy that surfaces as a legit, like, surefire top 10 wide receiver. I think that's certainly in the cards, but at worst, he is a top 20 receiver in the NFL and profiles as that true number one do-it-all receiver. But you draft Jerry Jeudy, to me, the best wide receiver in this class. He is straight up the best route runner I've ever evaluated since I started doing this about 4 years ago. So he is ridiculous. His release off the line of scrimmage, his ball skills is probably his weakest part of his game, but it's not like a major concern. He has some drops. He's not gonna, big body guys, but that's what you have Courtland Sutton here for. That's what you have Noah Fant here for, who you hope takes a step up in the sort of contested jump ball scenario. Now you have your route runner, and you want to talk about having a receiver that's going to make those reads easier and let Drew Lock's physical abilities thrive and neutralize his weaknesses as far as the mental part of Drew Lock's game. That's going to be Jerry Jeudy, because when you get to the NFL, those throwing windows, guys aren't as open as guys are going to be in college. But Jerry Jeudy just might be that open in the NFL as he was in college, because he's so quick. He is fast. He does have that threat to be a deep threat as well, which keeps defensive backs on their heels and keeps them honest. And Jerry Jeudy manipulates that so well by manipulating his own body with different angles. And just D-backs are constantly on their heels. They have no idea where Jerry Judy's going. If Pat Shurmur can utilize Jeudy correctly with Courtland Sutton, there's no reason this can't be the best wide receiving core in the NFL, wide receiver duo. Now, there's more to this core than just those two, but I can't think of a much better complement to Jerry Jeudy than Courtland Sutton. I can't think of a much better complement to Courtland Sutton than Jerry Jeudy. So I honestly can't say enough about that duo. To get Jerry Jeudy in this draft was just remarkable. And then they go overkill by getting KJ Hamler in the second round. Hamler is almost the Drew Lock of receivers because his tape is limited. He is very young coming out. I want to say he's still 20 years old. Did not play in a prolific passing game at Penn State. But when they used him, he was almost unstoppable. He did show some good route running. His run after the catch ability is special. He's going to play a lot in the slot this year, as is Jerry Jeudy. I just think KJ Hamler is what's really going to set this thing over the top. The nice thing about this receiving core, and we haven't even talked about the tight end room or the receiver depth that we'll get to, is you will know after this year if Drew Lock is your guy. There's not going to be this Blake Bortles window or some of these other quarterbacks where they might play okay, but you're kind of on the fence on whether you should move on from him or not. If Drew Lock can't figure it out here in his second year with this wide receiver core, this team knows Drew Lock is not the answer, because this wide receiver core is it, man. This is legit. So the receiver depth after those three does leave a bit to be desired. Not that that's super important, but you have Deshaun Hamilton, who's very slowly developing. He's another guy, him and Hamler, both Penn State guys, they're going to kind of challenge each other for the slot reps. I do think both those guys will play. I liked Hamilton coming out. He just hasn't really reached that consistency. You have Tim Patrick, who's another kind of bigger bodied guy. He's a guy that this coaching staff likes. He makes some big catches here or there, but he just doesn't have the tools to be a true full starter. Then you have Deontay Spencer, Tyree Cleveland. I picture these guys to kind of compete for the kick returning roles. And then Juwan Winfrey is a 6th round pick last year, who's another kind of more physical receiver. He's going to try to get in the mix there with Fred Brown and a cluster of other undrafted players. So the receiver room does drop off, but that top 3 is so special. And then your tight end room boosts this thing up as well. So Noah Fant in year 2. We've talked about a lot of tight ends to this point already. Year 2 is a big year for tight ends. It's a big learning curve, especially for a Noah Fant who is almost part wide receiver. Like he's going to do a little bit of everything. Think about Evan Ingram. Noah Fant definitely came on late last year, but he had a slow start. So I do expect Noah Fant to contribute as he's not going to be an elite player, but he will be an elite mismatch problem. And if Pat Shurmur can draw that up, he worked with Evan Ingram with the Giants, so it's going to be something he's familiar with, a skill set that he's going to be able to work with, basically. So I like Noah Fant in this offense as a 3rd or 4th piece to just open this whole thing up. I could see him having a pretty good year depending how prolific this passing game gets, because there's only so many targets to get. But he is going to make an impact, even if it's as a bit of a decoy. Either way, I like what you have there a lot. And then you have depth. You got Jeff Hireman and Nick Vannett. I think both these guys will make the team. They're both kind of blocking types, can do a little bit as a receiver, but along with Jake Butt, Troy Fumagalli, all these guys, they're not starting caliber tight ends. They just don't have the athleticism to be any sort of, I always like to say guys that keep defensive coordinator or offensive coordinators up at night because you just don't know how to guard them. None of them are that, but they're just good, solid tight ends. It's one of the deeper tight end rooms in the league. And then you draft Albert O in the 4th round, Albert Okwuegbunam. Ran a 4.5 40 at the combine. I don't think that's representative of how fast he plays, but if you can unlock that speed, it's just another problem to have here. It allows you to maybe flex Noah Fant out a little more. Albert O is a bigger body guy. I compared him to a guy that used to be here in Denver in Virgil Green, who is a very fast player as far as his 40 time, but just has never been able to figure it out in the receiving game. Now, Albert O played with Drew Lock. He had his best season with Drew Lock at Missouri, so maybe there's some chemistry there. Definitely an interesting piece to get him in the 4th round with the draft they had. Why not at that point, especially with how good they were in free agency. So 5th for the wide receiver room. There's a lot of good receiver rooms in the league, and the Broncos are one of the best. And if some of these younger guys like Fant, Albert O, obviously Judy and Hamler, and even Cortland Sutton's still young, there's ridiculous potential for this to be the best wide receiver or just receiver group in the entire league. And Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, you got to keep an eye on those guys as well. So, man, you've got options here if you are Drew Lock. 5th just might be the worst case scenario for this receiving room the more I talk about it. So let's move on to the offensive line for Denver, and they've done a good job to beef this thing up. It's been a problem over the years. I think you don't fix your offensive line in one offseason. I think it takes a year or 2 or even 3. And I think Denver is slowly getting there. I do rank them 16th, and I think they're going to be a middling offensive line this year. They're not going to maul guys. They're not going to buy all day for Drew Lock, but they're going to give him enough time to make those reads. Like I said, everything is in place for you to at least know if Drew Lock is your franchise quarterback here, and that comes back to the offensive line as well. So you have Garrett Bowles at left tackle. Most Broncos fans I've talked to do not like Garrett Bowles. I think he's one of those guys similar to Nate Solder with the Giants, where when he loses, it seems to be like he loses really bad. But Bowles is a really powerful run blocker, and he can hold his own in a matchup-dependent way against more powerful rushers. I think he will hold up a little better. He is up there in age. I think he was like 27 when they drafted him in 17, maybe 25. Okay, I just looked. He's 28 years old now, so he's already up there in age, looking to get his second contract year. So he's more of a question for the future. He's a capable left tackle. You have at left guard probably going to be Dalton Reisner. Was a good pick in the second round last year. He's kind of one of these high floor, lower ceiling, versatile offensive linemen, but I think he's your answer at left guard. He's going to be a capable starter. Then you have questions at center and right guard. What are we going to be looking at? Right now they're listing Lloyd Cushenberry as the starting center, with Graham Glasgow as the starting right guard. And Glasgow, we talked about him in the Lions deep dive a couple days ago. Like, this was one of my favorite signings of the offseason. I think he was one of the premier free agents. We see a lot of offensive line get overpaid. Guys like Brandon Flowers, guys like Hal Vaitai. That's not the case with Graham Glasgow. He is a guy that is well worth it. I don't understand why Detroit let him go. I think when you have a premier offensive lineman like Graham Glasgow, and premier meaning, top 10 at their position, even top 15, like guys that you don't have to worry about and they're going to win their matchups on a consistent basis, those are premier players to me because of the lack of depth at that position, any of these offensive line positions in the NFL. So Denver got one of those in free agency, honestly at a pretty decent price for like $10 million a year. So I love that signing. The question is, does he start at center or guard? He also has that versatility to play either. It's going to come down to how much does Lloyd Cushenberry impress? And then also, how much does Netani Moody become part of the conversation here? Because I had Netani Moody as the highest rated guard in this class with a major red flag for injury. He has never finished a season healthy, but when he's out there, this dude is terrifying. Like, think of Kaleki Osemele in his prime, just constantly putting guys on their ass, just a beast, a really good athlete, a smart player. If he's healthy, that's going to be one of the steals of the draft in the 6th round. And as far as Lloyd Cushenberry goes, I wasn't as high on Cushenberry. I thought he had a lot of ups and downs at LSU over the course of his career and didn't show a lot of development. He seems like one of these guys that kind of impressed at the Senior Bowl against not so good competition. With some of those defensive linemen, the top guys pulled out and the depth there just wasn't that good. So I don't know. I'm not really in on Lloyd Cushenberry. A lot of people really like him. I'm in the minority, so take that with a grain of salt. Personally, I think this best offensive line is going to be if Moody can stay healthy at right guard, and then you play Glasgow at center. And that's when, if that can happen, this has potential, especially if your right tackle here, Juwan James, can stay healthy. All of a sudden, that can be a top 10 offensive line. And then it's like, whoa. Like, if Drew Lock is good with a top 10 offensive line, a top 5 receiving core, and a good running back room, and a good offensive coordinator, by the way, and Pat Shurmur, whoa. Like, that's why I talk about this team as a Super Bowl sleeper. There's ifs there, but my goodness. So I will talk about the right tackle in Juwan James. Good player. He was a player that they maybe had to overpay in free agency, but they did get him. He's a starting caliber guy when healthy. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and if he can't, it's going to hurt him because you have Calvin Anderson. Elijah Wilkinson can play some tackle. It's just not looking very good at tackle behind him. So he's simply put got to stay on his feet. Dalton Reisner, though, can play some tackle. Potentially you could work something out there. They've got some options, but there's question marks as well with this offensive line. So the offense as a whole is going to rank 22nd, which seems pretty low based on everything we just said. It's just a matter of everything working together. You do have some question marks, especially with that quarterback position, but this could go anywhere from a bottom 10 offense to a top 10 offense, just mostly off of Drew Lock, but also that offensive line group. And you are counting on some of these younger wide receivers to play up to their potential. As far as Pat Shurmur goes, I love this hiring. I thought between him and Jay Gruden, you were looking at two really good offensive coordinators. I don't know if they're necessarily good head coaches, but I can't think of a better combination of Pat Shurmur and Vic Fangio, like, they're going to control their sides of the ball. I like the culture here. A lot of young players that they're going to have to kind of learn together what kind of, personality they're going to have as a team, what their overall look's going to be. But 21st for the offensive coaching culture, and then 8th for the defensive coaching culture. I think Vic Fangio is, simply put, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, especially when you want to talk about a coach that understands the relationship between pass rush and coverage, and he will teach his front seven to get after the quarterback at a very high level. And you got the bodies here to do it as well. So the defense as a whole is going to rank 6th. And they got a lot of dudes here. So let's start with the run defense. I am going to try to rip through this. This team, simply put, was one of the best teams against the run last year, and their depth on the interior is a big part of that. Now, they are going to lose Derek Wolfe, but they more than made up for that. So you have Mike Purcell, Shelby Harris, who are phenomenal against the run. You bring in Jarrell Casey, who at his age, I actually think he's better as a pass rusher, as kind of a 3 or a 4 tech than a run defender. He's a little bit undersized, but he's still going to contribute in run defense. You draft McTelvin Agim in the 3rd round. Some people liked him. I didn't quite see as much. I'm not going to tell you I watched 4 in-depth games of McTelvin Agim. In what I did watch of him, he didn't necessarily pop. They see something they like there. They really are good at evaluating that position. The list goes on. You have Draymond Jones. Now, that you want to talk about a 3rd round pick, I really like. More as a pass rusher, we'll talk about him. DeMarcus Walker is still here. He's becoming a better player. He'll even play some, I don't even want to say edge, just more of that 4 tech, 5 tech. Christian Covington is a good player here that they signed from Dallas. I can't believe the depth they have on the interior here. And they didn't really overspend on any of these guys. So, man, I can't really say enough about what this team's going to do on the interior. And then you factor in Bradley Chubb coming back, who's going to be, in my eyes, one of the better run-defending edge players. Von Miller, who has really evolved his game over the last few years to be an elite run defender on the edge. And then you have good linebackers. Alexander Johnson is a player not a lot of people know. He was a 27-year-old rookie out of Tennessee last year who totally broke out as one of the better linebackers in the league, and he is that bigger-bodied guy that will get nasty in the trenches. Todd Davis, a little smaller, but as a second linebacker, it works. This front seven is going to get after it against the run. So ultimately, they're going to come in ranked 7th. I don't expect this team to have a lot of troubles defending the run at all this year. And then the pass rush is going to rank 5th. I mean, God, we could talk about every one of these guys individually. This video would be an hour and a half long, but we know what Von Miller is, although I will say he's becoming a little bit more of a forgotten man. He had a bit of a down year last year. He is getting up there in age, but he's still, worst case scenario, you're talking about a top 10 edge rusher. I think he'll have a little bit better of a year than he did last year, just with things being a little more consistent here. So I'm expecting Von Miller to play like a top 10 edge guy. Bradley Chubb, I don't know if I'm high or low on him at this stage. I think he's a really good number 2 pass rusher. He doesn't have the elite physical tools maybe to ever be a true number 1 guy. I know his rookie season he had a lot of sacks. It was a disproportionate amount to his pressure numbers. But Von Miller and Bradley Chubb is one of the best edge duos in the league. We call these guys number 1s and number 2s for a reason. It's almost impossible to have 2 number 1s. So Denver has a high-end number 1 and a high-end number 2. That's about all you can ask for, right? So you do have some depth on the edge. You have Jeremiah Atuachu, who's a veteran that can kind of rotate, play a little bit in coverage. Do keep an eye on Malik Reed, a breakout undrafted rookie last year, got a ton of playing time with the Bradley Chubb injury. He is a very serviceable third. And he is, in this 3-4 defense, going to bring some of the versatility aspects that you don't necessarily get with Bradley Chubb as far as dropping him into coverage. You have Malik Carney, who I liked coming out of North Carolina, a really high-character, versatile defensive end edge player. Derek Tujika, he was one of my favorite 7th-round prospects in this class. Just a guy that was super productive at North Dakota State, showed a well-equipped tool belt is a term a lot of people use as far as a pass rusher. Just has those counter moves, really a high work ethic kind of guy, and a decent athlete. So I like the depth here. No one that I think will ever emerge as a starting caliber player, but I think Vic Fangio is going to be more than happy with his edge room. And then the interior, my God, there's so many guys here. to me, Jarrell Casey and Shelby Harris are the first two guys you want to talk about as your starting nickel interior rushers. Casey is a formerly elite interior pass rusher that is age regressing, but he's still very good. I would say a top 20 or so. Someone that I expect to get 45 pressures or so, which is more than enough for a really good pass rush, especially when you have Shelby Harris, who will generate some pressure, a little better against the run and more of a gap control, 3-tech, 4-tech kind of guy, but still a guy that you do have to account for as a rusher. But you have Draymond Jones here in year 2, who can be a game wrecker, more of a game changer, I should say, for this pass rush, because at Ohio State, his burst on the interior was unblockable at times. One of the best get-offs I've ever seen for an interior defensive lineman. A young player, a guy that's learning sort of a new position, who played some of that hybrid look at Ohio State. Can he take a step up with mentors here in Casey, Harris, and of course, Vic Fangio? I think Draymond Jones is a wild card for this pass rush that could take it from 5 to 1. I think that much of Draymond Jones. So you got that. DeMarcus Walker and Christian Covington are two more names that can rotate and be a factor. And then we'll see if McTelvin Agim gets in the mix. There's just so many bodies ahead of him. Man, this might be the deepest pass rush in the NFL, and they're going to come in 5th. So that front 7 is nasty. It's up there for the best, most well-balanced front 7s in the league. We talked about the linebacker room, but let's go through this group that's going to rank 20th. Alexander Johnson was a bit of, I don't want to say one-year wonder, but a late career breakout at 27 years old. He is a bigger-bodied guy. He's not overly athletic, so how much will his success in coverage translate? That's wait and see. I do believe in the guy, but it's a small sample size to this point as far as him being one of the better linebackers in the league. I'm not going to say he can't repeat it, but that's definitely a question mark. I do think worst case is he's going to be a starting caliber linebacker with good discipline against play action. Was the biggest thing that stood out to me. Was he understood that he can't overcommit, and that all these teams want to run play action. He was really good at getting his head around and finding guys, along with being a good thumper. So I like Alexander Johnson. Todd Davis is fine. He's a good veteran. He's a starting caliber player, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type of low-end starter. You have Josie Jewell, who, similar to Todd Davis, really smart player, just not the best athlete, never going to instill that fear factor in the offense in the middle of the field. I did like the Justin Strnad pick in the 5th round. He might be the most fluid coverage linebacker on this roster at the moment. It's just as far as athleticism and movement skills, and he did cover at a very high level at Wake Forest. So definitely want to keep an eye on Justin Strnad. Does he challenge either Johnson or Todd Davis for third down sort of coverage reps? So do keep an eye on him. Other than that, the linebacker room, I think it's solid. I think that's really the best thing you can say about this linebacking group. Now we get to the secondary, which does not really have the depth that the rest of this defense does. And if you have injuries back here, I think you could see some holes in this defense. I would say that's probably the biggest knock on the defense at the moment. I was really surprised that this team did not make the move that the Oakland Raiders did in signing Prince Amukamara, who worked really well with Vic Fangio in Chicago. Because that second corner spot to me is a glaring weakness on this roster. So you do bring in AJ Bouye through a trade, which was a great move. He's on the back end of his career, but he's still a very high-end starter. I don't know if he's going to play like a quote-unquote true number 1 here for Denver, but nonetheless, he is going to be a very well-balanced starting caliber corner there. So I love that addition. It filled a huge need for this team, and that was the beginning of the hype for this team. But then the number 2 corner, other than AJ Bouye, who's it going to be? Because Bryce Callahan is that nickel corner, and maybe they want to do what they've done with Chris Harris here and kind of have him play some more outside corner and be the number 2 corner in base defense. That could be the case, but as far as their nickel package, which you're going to be running 65, 70% of the time in 2020, that's just the way the game's played nowadays, who is the other corner going to be? And right now it looks like it's probably going to be Isaac Yiadom. It's really between him and Devontae Bosby, who kind of came out of nowhere and played pretty well last year, actually took Isaac Yiadom's spot. But, we were only talking about 3 games there. I think with the draft pedigree of Isaac Yiadom, who I did like coming out of Boston College. This team's going to hope that in year 3 he can take that step up as the number 2 outside corner. And then you also have Michael Ojemudia, which was a really good pick in the 3rd round. Like, I don't know where they got all these picks, but it's really impressive that they did make these picks. So Ojemudia, I think, has a very good chance to start. And my pro comp for him was actually Prince Amukamara. Really good, lengthy, physical press corner. Vic Fangio does like to run a lot of zone coverage, so I actually think Ojemudia is going to push right there. It's just he is the rookie here. I think they'd probably go through Yiadom and Bosby before they get to Ojemudia, but he could really impress. So you have 3 guys that I think have a chance to play like starting caliber corners, but I'm just not all that excited about any 3 of them. You'd have Duke Dawson, who I did like coming out of Florida. They traded for him from New England. He just hasn't really shown much, but he is more of a nickel corner. As long as Bryce Callahan's healthy, I don't think he's going to play a ton unless it's as a safety. That could be something that we see here is Duke Dawson playing some free safety, and then maybe Kareem Jackson comes in and plays some different corner looks. He's played a little bit of everything. That's a good transition to this safety room. So you have Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, which is one of the better safety duos in the league. And they're both very versatile. But Justin Simmons traditionally has played a little more free safety than strong safety here. So I expect that to continue, but they will move him down in the box. He really is a versatile do-it-all safety. So I love what you have in Justin Simmons. Broncos fans might want me to say more about him. I just think he's a top 10 to 15 safety. Do-it-all, really good quality player, good athlete. So I like that. And then you have, again, Kareem Jackson, who has done a little bit of everything, whether it's free safety, strong safety, slot corner, who again is a top 15 to 20 safety in the league. So I like this secondary a lot. That number 2 corner spot, you're hoping that between Yiadom and Bosby and Ojemudia, one of these guys is going to break out. You don't really have a lot of depth behind those guys, though. The safety room especially. I think Duke Dawson, you'd almost have to ask him to play some safety because Trey Marshall, Kahani Smith, PJ Locke, Douglas Coleman, they're complete unknown, undrafted assets. So that's really it. That's your secondary. They are going to rank 12th in the secondary. If that number 2 corner spot can establish itself as a consistent starting caliber, reliable force, you are talking about a top 10 secondary for sure. I don't think you necessarily have a true superstar in this secondary, right? Depending how you feel about Justin Simmons, I suppose. But you could have really high caliber starters at 4 of the 5 spots. And then if you could just have a baseline starting caliber guy that's not going to be the weakest link at your number 2 corner, or at least not a guy that offenses are always attacking, that would be a big deal. So there is your defensive run through. Again, the defense is going to rank 6th. I think that this defense is another reason you talk about this team as a Super Bowl sleeper, because if some of those things come together in the offensive side of the ball, you could be looking at a top 10 offense. And then we're definitely looking at a top 10 defense, I would say, at least as far as the coach, the culture, and the roster goes here. So that's a pretty freaking good recipe for a Super Bowl team if you can get a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm definitely saying it could. So this is a really exciting Broncos team. There's a lot of hype around this team. Let's just look at their schedule and kind of talk about what I'm looking at here. So keep in mind, when I do these schedule predictions, it's more like, who do I expect to be favored at this point in the predictive process? So that just explains kind of why at this point in time you end up with what we have here, where they are winning every home game and losing every road game. It's obviously not going to play out like that. I will say that this scenario is giving them losses to a lot of winnable games. Looking at the Jets, the Patriots, the Panthers, the Raiders, those are teams that, other than the Patriots, that we've already covered. And the Patriots have pretty big quarterback question marks themselves. So those are the games I'm looking at. Like, can Drew Lock be one of those high-end quarterbacks where he can go on the road and win big, meaningful games? That's really going to be the pivot point, because I think this team, their home games aren't that bad. You get Miami, you get the Raiders, the Titans at home in the opener, and you get the Bucs early in the season. Tom Brady, especially at this point in his career, and now with a new team, I don't think that offense is going to be full cylinder early in the year, especially Denver, that's like historically good at home. So that's a really good time to get one of your hardest home games. Get Buffalo and the Chargers at home. And then even the Saints at home later in the season when it's starting to get colder, Drew Brees on the road. You know, I think that's a really good draw as far as their home road split. So this has them going 8-8. Obviously, again, guys, it's not going to play out like this where they win every home game, they lose every road game. It's just kind of, Vegas gives 3 points. I'm looking at this sort of who's going to be favored in this games, I suppose. But yeah, 8-8, that is their over-under. So a bit of a conservative approach to the prediction here, but like I said, guys, Super Bowl bet for this team. If you got $20 to just kind of throw a flyer out there, this might be the team this year. I've kind of hit the nail on the head in recent years with the Niners and the Eagles. So Broncos fans, you just hope I'm right about that one at least, even though I ranked them 21st. A lot more variables, I think, for this team than teams like the Eagles and the Niners that ranked in more of the 12 range when I said that. But there you go, win range of 6 to 12. Definitely the most polarizing range for any team we've done so far. That was probably the most fun deep dive I've recorded. This team kind of gets me fired up. I'm excited to watch this team. I think they're going to be one of the more fun, interesting teams for the 2020 season. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned a thing or two. Please do hit that like button. Drop a comment down below who you think is coming next. What are your expectations for this team? But until tomorrow, we'll have our next deep dive. Cheers. We'll see you later.